Tree Alliance. We have a few more board members in the audience. There's Aaron here and Dave in the audience, and a couple more people might be coming. But thanks so much for coming out. I'd just very briefly say that the Quincy Tree Alliance is of all volunteers, and our aim is to protect the trees we have and expand the tree canopy as well. So we have outreach events like this, as well as you'll see some signs we're going to put up around the Porch Fest houses, the trees around the Porch Fest houses that talk about those specific trees and how they benefit the neighborhoods and the property owners. They actually raise the property values. So anyway, please, Erin probably sent you around the computer to have everybody sign up. If you're not signed up, you can find her, and then I'll just introduce our speakers. So here we have Dan Cathcart. He's the city's tree warden. He's been here since last February, right?
End of February last year, yes.
Yeah, so he'll be telling us about exciting stuff with Milwaukee Forest. And this is Marie Andrews, and she, the group posted a story about Milwaukee Forest, I think, in a Facebook group, and you commented, "Oh, I built one of those in my backyard." So I thought, what? So anyway, so thank you so much for coming, and thanks to them for being here.
Thank you, Maggie, and I would like to thank the, hold please. Okay, I'd like to, thanks Maggie, and thank you Quincy Tree Alliance for putting these events together. It's always nice to be able to get out there and interact a bit with the public, whether it be in person or on QATV, because this is a great way to get some of our messages out there for folks who might not be on social media and things like that. It's nice to have other methods to deliver information to the public. So appreciate that. And so today I'm going to talk a little bit about what a Milwaukee forest is. And it's a very interesting approach to increasing canopy cover within any area, but in our case, an unforgiving urban area, right? And mine's going to be a little, my part of the presentation is going to be a little nuts and bolts theory behind it, what we plan to do, where we plan to do it, and how we're going to do it. And then we'll turn it over to Maria, who's got the fun stuff. She actually built one herself in her yard, as Maggie said, about 2 years ago, and we've got some great photos of her, the journey her garden has taken since she used this approach. And again, she did it all herself. It wasn't any, researched it, understood some of the methodologies, applied it, and it's been very successful. So that's going to be fun. She's got a bunch of pictures to show us. So, okay, so what is a Milwaukee forest? You often hear pocket forest, tiny forest, and it is that, but it's more. The Milwaukee method was actually developed by a Japanese botanist, Professor Akira Miyawaki, and he started doing this back in the 70s, if my memory serves, where he investigated natural forests and kind of wanted to analyze why does it do well as a natural forest in an area. What are we doing wrong when we try to recreate or create our own version of a forest? Why doesn't it develop as well? Why doesn't it, achieve that same biodiversity, canopy cover, density, all the ecosystem service benefits that a natural forest would apply, would provide? So he looked into that, and his inspiration was from natural ecosystems. So not only is it a quantity of trees, it's what trees grow well next to other trees, or what trees don't grow well next to other trees. How does this progress? How does a natural forest develop as a system instead of individual trunks or stems, or however you want to look at it. So the Milwaukee forest is 100% organic. It's dense and diverse, and due to some of the methodologies, it'll tend to become a what we would consider a mature forest in 20 to 30 years instead of 80 to 100 years. And it sounds too good to be true in some regards, but because of the methodologies used, we'll talk a little bit about that. These are some statistics that we put out there that they do grow 10 times faster and 30 times denser. And in essence, because we plant a lot of units, right? And when you plant a lot of units, especially when they're young, they're very energetic and looking for sunlight. And so there's natural competition, and a lot of times we look at competition as maybe something bad. And if you're looking at an individual tree, maybe that one tree isn't going to develop as big a canopy, as broad a branch spread and so on if it's in a forest setting. But as a whole, the whole system is growing much, much faster because it's doing this, right? It's working its way to get to the sunlight. And because of that too, it's obviously a lot denser and more biodiversity, not only in the plant material but in everything that goes with it, right? So all the wildlife, the microbes, all that is in a natural setting. You go out in a forest, you're going to see that compared to a urban forestry type setting. You don't have a lot of interaction with different parts of the ecosystem. You have a tree, maybe you water it and hope it lives, right? And here we're going to go to the next level with that. And the beauty of it too is there's maintenance for the first couple of years. And by maintenance, we're talking watering and weeding and that. But then it's completely self-sufficient. They're not, we don't, the successful ones throughout, that have been popping up all over the world, they usually say, depending on the growing season, when you put them in, 2.5 to 3 years, depending on what the season is, of required watering and weeding to make sure that there's no invasives popping in, and then they can take care of themselves. And then they're so typically they're closed to the public for that first couple of years to allow them to establish, and then they are ready to go. And they can be built in very small, as in someone's yard, and also in unforgiving areas. A lot of places that these have been deployed have been a big parking lot of a building that doesn't need as big of a parking lot, and they go in and they carve out a piece of it, rip up the asphalt or the concrete, whatever it is, recondition it, and put them in places like that. So being able to target areas that are very unforested, the heat island effect and things are very strong. This is a solution to help mitigate some of those problems in troubled geographical locations. And they are for all those reasons, they're great for a city trying to rapidly increase their canopy cover. So many, we try our best to do, street tree planting, and we do a lot of it. We just put 60 trees in Quincy Point area. We got lots more coming, but something like this, the benefits of the collective as opposed to the individual are much more. It's 30 times probably more beneficial, as far as having complete canopy. Come on in, complete canopy cover instead of individual ones down the street. So how these are built, and it's going to be a little different scale than Maria did in her yard, where she was able to do it herself. But it's really the installation kind of comes down to four main components, right? So first we identify the natural vegetation, and this is an analysis, like I said, that was done. What does, in our geographic area, what does a natural forest look like? Does a maple grow well next to an oak, or in those kind of layouts, or what is sort of the pattern of, because it's nature doesn't like straight lines, so it's not you don't go in and do that. You almost take a snapshot of what a natural forest looks like and try to recreate that, to scale in your garden areas. So there's a fair amount of research done to to understand how the layout of the plants are going to go. And we're actually consulting with an organization out of India who does these all over the world. And we're working with them, and they've actually done some projects in the area and have done a lot of this research already, which is, you know, a nice head start for the program. But that's sort of the blueprint, right? How we want it to develop. And then there's the preparing of the soil. And I'm going to show you where we're going to put it, but in our area, we're going to be, there's a lot of invasives. So we're going to cut everything down, basically remove a foot of soil, put back fill, and then clean topsoil on top of it. So it's in that final, the growing soil, if you will, is a prescription soil too. So it's going to be created to the specifications that, that will be the most beneficial, right, microbe content, other supplements within the soil piece of it, which is really only one part of it, but we have to have a good, solid foundation for the trees to establish. So getting the site ready, kind of soil prep site ready, and then planting of the saplings. So it's heavily planted, and we're going to talk about that. We end up with about 3 plants for every square meter. So it's a heavily planted area, and that again is on purpose, and it's to stimulate that competition and rapid growth. And then, you know, within the planting, though, there's a lot of other incorporated organic material, compost tea and manure and these other things, straw and wheat husks to keep compaction down in the soil. There's a lot of components that go into it. And finally, you finish off with mulching. So that's the installation. And then, like I said, for a couple of years, we have maintenance, which consists of watering, making sure, and that's only supplemental watering if needed based on summer months and heat and natural rainfall. Because the mulching that we're going to use straw mulch to help retain the moisture. Weeding, if there's any weeding that needs to be done, we're going to make sure that they don't take hold, and that's about it. And we do that for the 2.5 years, and then we're off to the races, right? So what are we trying to accomplish? Is something like that starts like this. This is a planting. It's like these were taken from our partner's website. I have some comparisons here for you in a bit, but just to show that that's what it started with, and that's what it is, 2 years later, 3 years later. So, that's sort of the goal, to go from nothing to something substantial. So, I've located a spot, and here's a map of Quincy. That's the Quincy Adams Tea Station, for those of you who can see it. I know it's down the bottom, sorry. But that's the Quincy Adams Tea Stop. And then right next or across the way, next to the car wash, there's a vacant lot, right, that looks like this right now. And that's where we're going to go. So again, this is Atlantis through here, a bunch of popcorn and everything back there. So we're going to cut it all down, clear it out, remove that first foot of soil, bring in a half foot of filled and a half foot of topsoil, and start our garden there. So this is another view of it. Just that pink line is what's city property. And we're going to go towards the street side, the thought being that we could use some of that triangle for staging and support and storage of equipment during the installation, but to have the forest close to the street, and as you're walking to or from the tee, be able to peel off and go into it. So we're again, the tee stops down here, and the center street. So this is my trying to draw on a computer, but to get the rough idea, I was going for kidney shape. I didn't end up with it, but anyway, we'll call it an oval for lack of a better term. But you would like to have a walking path through the middle with sort of an open area with benches, so that it could be, you just pass through and then you're back to Center Street on your way, and a little interpretive center here explaining what it is, why we built it, who paid for it. Federal government, gets some grant money from them, so we want to make sure that that's all pointed out. But it's about the green area, which will be the forest, is 500 square meters. So it's not huge, but it's you know, it's decent size, and it's going to kind of look like that, right? But that's more round. We're going to be more my kidney shape, but similar. They have an opening in the middle like that, so it's going to be similar to that. So as I mentioned, you know, the plantings are done with all small plants, whether they're whips or you know, little saplings, based on what the plants are. But they're selected not only for how they grow in relation to one another in a forest, and I guess this kind of ties into it, but the idea is also to develop a natural forest canopy layer, where you have the upper canopy, a tree layer, a sub-tree layer, and a shrub layer. So you have those natural changes of height of the plant material as it grows, as it develops, which is, you know, how it does in a natural forest. So that's part of the analysis, is to reach a goal like this. And just some fun stats on what we're going to be doing, right? So we're going to be doing about a 500 square meter garden, which is about 600 square yards to you and me. We're going to have 1,500 saplings in that. So that's 3 saplings per square meter. So it's a lot of plant material is going to be planted. We're going to have about 150 yards of new fill, the base layer, and then 150 yards of topsoil, 5 tons of manure. That's always a fun one to talk about, right? Composted manure, old, we're supposed to get the non-smelly type. And to make 100 gallons of compost tea, we need 50 gallons of molasses and 50 gallons of compost tea concentrate, and we mix it up and use that for stimulating the new growth. We're going to have 3.5 tons of wheat husks to help the soil from getting compacted, keep the aeration going. 1.5 tons of leaf compost to be mixed in with the soil, and then mulching it all with 3.5 tons of straw mulch. So that's just kind of the scope of the project we're going to be putting into that area. And I don't know who those people are. I found them, but they look like they were doing some really loving, caring planting. So I thought it was a good shot. So here's some comparisons. I want to run through a few of these before we let Maria, I answer some questions and we'll look at Maria's. But so here's one. I don't know where these necessarily are. Some of them are from India. Some of them I think are South America. They're kind of all over the world where they've done them. But this is a 5-month from planting. Pretty impressive. That's 11 months. So we can see that initial rapid growth is pretty evident. That's 7 months. 15 months. I guess you can read the months, but in case they're in the back and have a tough time, I'll mention it. That one I looked at that's kind of going to be like ours, that's a 2-year one. It looks pretty well developed for 2 years. That one is 8 months, 20 months, 5 months. And just to kind of recap, so we talked about, the methodology, or the theory behind this type of methodology. And here's some of the statistics that we've found that based on successful implementation of these gardens. So they do grow 10 times faster than if we were going to plant street trees down the way. It's a much more competitive environment, and they do grow up to, as they say, 10 times faster, as we saw in some of those before and afters. That's pretty rapid growth. We also have the canopy is 30% more dense due to the compaction of the planting site, and 30 times more dense is, when you look at ecosystem services, is huge, right? When you're dealing with that much more canopy cover as to what carbon is being sequestered and filtration and all those things, it's just a huge. And another real big one here is the heat. The heat island effect is much more effective in this system. 30 times more CO2 absorption, as you would expect with the 30 times more dense canopy. But something people don't always think about is noise filtration too. That's right by the highway at the T-stop. It'd be a nice sound buffer in that area too. And dust filtration, it's, anytime we can get these into heavy traffic areas is a big benefit. So we're excited about that. They also, we talked about it's 100 times more biodiverse, and we'll see that in Maria's pictures too, the stuff in the ecosystem that she now has on Broadway in Quincy is quite amazing. Oh, I gave out your, at her house in Quincy is, sorry. And again, we'll use native species, right? So that's, obviously that's a big, I consider that a no-brainer, but I will reiterate that we would be replanting a native forest with native species in a completely organic matter too. We won't be introducing, any synthetic fertilizers or anything like that. We've got 5 tons of manure. We're good. So, so that kind of covers the. Some of the statistical type benefits that we see from the garden, from building these Miyawaki forests. So I'm really excited. We're hoping to, again, I mentioned the federal government. The city of Quincy received a $750,000 grant from the U.S. Forest Service to use in the underserviced neighborhoods in Quincy. So for that money, we're looking at this section of South Quincy, North Quincy, and Germantown. There's some clear parameters of where the money needs to be spent, but we've got like 4.5 years to do it. So what we've decided, instead of just, maybe doing, 150 trees every year on the streets, we want to try this. So a portion of the money from that grant is paying for this, and the rest of it over the next 3 years will be used to supplement our plantings in those areas. And it might be mostly street trees, but we do have the latitude to include into, if appropriate, some park areas and things as well. As long as it's in the EJ zones, we're able to use it there pretty much. It's a broad brush if you stay there. So we're pretty happy with that. So that's where this is coming from. So I say that to say, dealing with the federal government, we were supposed to have all the contracts signed by December 31st. Hopefully, in the next couple of weeks, we'll get the contract signed, but who knows? So we were originally thinking we were going to shoot for the moon and plant this spring. Hopefully, we'll do it this fall. But we do have the window, heaven forbid, to do next spring if we're advised that makes better sense based on timing that we get to. But if all goes to plan, we're looking at a fall implementation of this. So that's sort of our timeline, and because most of it is contracted type work that we're able to do with this grant money, it's just a matter of finalizing details and pulling the trigger once we have the money to pay them, right? So that's a good side, and a lot of our partners that we are using for the consulting and helping develop it have a lot of the what they need already in their hip pocket to start to move. So we're excited about that. So that pretty much concludes what I wanted to say. There's our not quite our shape one again to wrap up, but that's what we're hoping to get to. And I'd be happy to answer any questions before I turn it over to Maria, or we can go right there. Sally.
So did you apply for the grant from the forest?
I did.
You did?
That was my first grant.
Good for you.
I was happy to learn that the city of Quincy just officially created a grant writer position with somebody who does that, because that was horrifying. I said, I'll fill this out. Let me see, what can it be? It can't be that. Oh my, you need what? And it was educational. But yeah, it worked out and we got the grant, so hey, that's good. Yes.
I know you probably have some specialists, advising you what to do, but is the actual work gonna be done by city employees, volunteers, hired people?
Combination thereof. That's still up in the air. We'd love to use volunteers, or partial volunteers, maybe with, paid folks who have experience in these gardens. But that's still a little up in the air. I have it budgeted for labor. Because I didn't want to go into it without that as a backup. As we get a little further, we might turn that out to who wants to help. And, because a lot of them are done that way, with community involvement, people get in there, roll up their sleeves and have at it. And, that's always, we wouldn't pay you, so that's good. But but I didn't want to commit to that to finalize the grant. But that's certainly a possibility, and I know we talked a little bit about it and how this would be a great activity if we get the folks interested in doing it. I would love to see that, because then it's our garden, not just the cities. It's all of ours, right? So, yes.
Well, that was one of my questions, thank you. The other was, so forests would tend to expand. So are you gonna try to actually keep it within the 500 square meters, or is it allowed to carry into that other section where the equipment will be, or non-city owned?
It typically is contained to that spot by ground cover and things included, around it. Now, not to say that we couldn't let it go back, but some of the things you almost want it isolated, because if you start having it, interact with the local residents, in other words, the trees that are already there or coming in from somewhere else, you don't want the two to meet, because then you're introducing invasives potentially again. So it's almost important to have that kind of contained area that doesn't allow for that to take hold, because something like an Oriental bittersweet or something could shoot its vines out and jump 20 feet. The next thing you know, it's all over the forest. So
How much of a distance will be between the Milwaukee and the other stuff?
in the back,
Yeah.
probably about, I think it's usually about 20 to 30 feet. Yes.
I actually have a question about, so you said you're taking off a foot of dirt, off the top. What are you gonna do with the dirt that you take off? 'Cause you said it's full of invasive plants, right?
Right, that'll be disposed of with whoever we hire to take it away and dispose of it. It won't be reused, because I think too, there's, it's, a lot of cars have sat there, so I'm worried about, so it'll be disposed of as hazardous waste, actually, because it's probably got oil and stuff in there too. We want that all out, as well as any of the seeds that go with it. So that'll probably go get burned somewhere and reconditioned or whatever, but it won't be, it won't be reused within the city or anything, because it won't be good for that, to fill in anywhere or anything. Yes?
So, great presentation, thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
You talked a lot about, look at the rapid growth after 6 months, a year. What does this look like 20 years down the line or more?
Well, 20 years down the line, we can expect to see what we would see in a 80 to 100-year-old forest. So mature trees, depending again on what our layout is and what species we use. We could be looking at 50, 60-foot trees by that point. So, in the back, you.
So could this system be used for a pre-existing forest? So we live very close to Paxton Park,
Mm-hmm.
and it's taken over by invasives.
Oh yes, terrible.
There's more poison ivy there than anywhere.
So, kind of like to answer the other question, if you can separate them with some sort of barrier or void that separates, and if you were to because that stuff is crazy to keep on top of it, make sure it doesn't come into your yard. It certainly can be done in a residential, and it wouldn't be something I would suggest we put right in the middle of another forest. But as far as abutting it or whatever, I don't see the problem there.
But just to maybe start to reclaim some of that.
Yeah, well, that's it. This is our test, right? And if we find it successful, I got about 4 other spots that I would love to see them go right off the top of my head. And if if it is successful, we might not have the grant money to go forward, but if we're paying for it, if it's well received and we want to expand it, well, then we're also maybe not limited to the exact locations that we have to use now, in order to satisfy the grant. So it's kind of nice to have this as our test run. But as far as and yes, Faxon's totally a mess with invasives. But then you got to kind of look at, do we cut down a relatively mature forest to plant a not mature forest? So we have to look at the big picture. To me, I would like to see us take areas that are a vacant lot or something and make good with them. Or, and not to say that it has to be something that's in disrepair. If it's a big open field at a the edge of one of our parks or something that makes sense, that's great too. There's a lot of those spots around the city. So we don't know 100% yet how that, we've gotta walk before we run, and that's hopefully what this is gonna do. Yes.
Where are you getting those huge amounts of raw materials like compost tea concentrate and the saplings too?
Yeah, well, there's the saplings. We have it's funny. I've got a funny story about that. I'm not using this vendor, but there's a few companies that do ecological restoration are a great source of a great vendor for sourcing the materials, because they'll go in and they redo wetlands and things, and not necessarily wetland plants, but all native plants. They have. Because they're small, again, they're able to produce them in large numbers. So securing the materials isn't so much a problem. But it was funny, I was looking into that and looking at where I could get them, and I found Massachusetts, or I think it said New England native, whatever, plant material, and it was out of like Minnesota. And apparently they grow the plants that are native here out there in their nurseries, and they do it for all over the country. So they have all these different natives, and none of them are native to Minnesota, where they're coming from, which I thought was, I guess it's not wrong. If we're looking for, a northern red oak, you would think you would grow it around here, but whatever. So anyway, that's kind of how I found that pretty funny. All right, so I think now what I'd like to do is I'm going to sit here and run the show, but Maria's going to talk about her thing. So we did my presentation. Now it's on to Maria's Groovy Forest.
I did not name that, just so you know. It was not me. I have a mic. Yes, and I'm very loud,
So
so
that's you want that one.
I want this one
They're
too.
the ones
Okay,
for the
can you guys
TV.
hear me? All right. So I have some notes here so I don't get sidetracked. I want to be able to tell everything. So I am Maria Andrews, born and raised in Quincy. When my parents passed away, I moved back to my childhood home back in 2018. And do we have the 2018 one?
I don't know, I put them in whatever order.
Well, this is okay though, because this is actually what it kind of looked like. It was just like a big open grass. My dad was the green thumb in the family, but when he was planting, he did the whole, the hydrangeas and the impatiens for my mom. My mom actually, that whole fence area used to be lined with these tall, beautiful pine trees. And when they first bought the house, my mother had him and my grandfather cut them all down. And I remember being a really small child, and there's a picture of me holding a twig and just like crying. They were like, I mean, my grandfather was attacked by blue jays because there were nests that they didn't know about. So they just like completely destroyed a whole ecological oasis. But so when I moved back, it was a clean slate, and I thought, I started vegetable gardening. That was like my big thing. And then from there, it kind of snowballed into wanting to green up the place a little bit. And so I started doing some research, and I've headed in the direction of planting native perennials, like just flowers for like the birds and the bees. And then that led me to, there's a property across the street. If you come and visit, you'll see the property across the street. Went up for sale in, I believe it was 2021. And it's a double lot. So there's a house on the corner, and then right next to it is just a forest. It's like a mini forest, but it's filled with like Norway maples, non-native stuff. But there's so many critters that live in there. And I was afraid when they sold the property, they would knock that down and just build condos, because that's kind of like the go-to that we're having. So I was determined to build something like that on my own property. And so I Googled, maybe there's something like tiny forests out there. And then I went down the rabbit hole of Miyawaki forests and how the benefits of them are. And it's really nice to see what Dan put up on there on a huge scale. I mean, that's a lot of trees, and it doesn't have to be a huge scale like that. You can do it in your backyard. I did it. So we can go to the next slide. I think we can go down to, again, these are white pines, but they're a cultivar of white pines. Those are the first things I put in there. I thought it was so amazing that my backyard actually had trees. You could go to the next slide. Oh, you're gonna see my dog in all of them, because that's it. So this started to be a progression. So I started putting the little trees in here, downy serviceberries, chinquapin oaks. This is just a learn as you go progress. We can go to the next one. This is where the beginning started, though. This is the side of my house. It was just an asphalt driveway. It's not even a driveway. It's just like a useless asphalt area. It used to, when we were little, we had a swimming pool behind the greenhouse. And I think my dad, it was originally dirt, and then he put asphalt on it because they were getting water in the basement. And it was because there were no trees. It was just all dirt. And so anytime it rained, it sunk into the basement. So we could go to the next slide. I had a company come and dig up the whole area based on what I wanted to do with the Miyawaki forest. So I can show you some of this. I'm totally already off track. So I sketched everything out. Literally, this was like my backyard. This was gonna be the side yard. And I've gone through probably like 3 or 4 diagrams with like which trees I wanted. I took trips to the Blue Hills, Wampatuck State Park, Bear Cove in Hingham, Blacks Creek, and we hike every morning with my dog, but it was the first time I started to really look at what was growing together, what was native, what wasn't, what was invasive, and I started to put a plan in place. I decided which canopy trees I wanted to have, what understory trees I wanted to have, the bushes underneath that I wanted to have, and everything I wanted to do had to be chemical-free and pesticide-free, because I just wanted to create a place where nature could live. So
And I want to interject one thing, and that's really important in our sourcing of material too, to make sure that we're getting stuff that's all hopped up on nitrogen when it gets here, kind of thing. So that is an important piece that I might not have mentioned. So
and trying to find places to buy that stuff is really hard. On a small scale, trying to go and find even just a regular garden store that sells native plants is almost unheard of. Like you don't go to Home Depot and find anything native. Anything you buy is probably already been raised with like pesticides or chemicals to begin with, because they're selling the perfect little tree with no holes in it. But through my research, I found a couple of, and if anybody is interested later on, as a side note, I have resources that I can email you if you're interested in finding out where I'm buying stuff. Every place I used is non-chemical. Most of the things I'm buying already are being eaten by like bugs or whatever, and that you want that. You actually want to see that on your trees. So you can go to the next slide. So, and this is, she blends. I just noticed she blends. I was like, oh look, there she is. My dog, again, her name is Sophia. Anyway, so this is after they dug out all the asphalt, they dug down about, it was probably more than a foot because they had to get not only the asphalt, they had to get the under, the rocks and the substrates. And then they replaced it with farming mulch, which was, I've never actually seen anything like it. It's almost like sand and mulch, and it's the perfect growing medium. So they filled that all in, and then I used straw on top of it. And so this was in October of 2021. And this is in December. So, okay, so there's one thing, if I can give you a bit of advice if you do this on your own. So I didn't have trees, so I had no leaves. So I went to all my neighbors and friends and was like, I will take all your fall leaves. Just come and bring them. And I did. And I dispersed them all over my yard. And it was this beautiful like oasis of fallen fall leaves. Don't do that. 2 years later, I'm pulling out vines and like invasives and stuff I never even seen before because of it. So it's a learn as you go progress for me. So we can go on to the next one. I purchased, so this brings me to how much it costs. I don't have $700,000 in grant money. So I had planned on originally buying, in my little fantasy world, trees that were already about 2 feet tall because I wanted it now and I wanted it now. So I looked, and to buy something on that scale, you're looking at $25 to $30 per tree. And I was going to plant 152 trees. There was no way that was going to happen. So I thought I was doomed until I found, and I think this might be the person you were talking about in Minnesota. I don't know. It was Reespill Ridge Nursery.
Something like that. I
Yeah,
can't remember that.
that's who I used. So I actually, well, this is because there's no place you can't get. I mean, I planted a lot of different trees, and you can't find that. And Arbor Day uses pesticides, so I didn't want to get it from there. And this was the only place that I found that didn't use pesticides and would deliver like on a smaller scale too. Like 152 trees for them was probably like, tiny. Yeah. But they came and they delivered, everything was bare root, and it was way less expensive. Each tree was like $3 to $5 on a bare root tree. So my intent was to put them into pots and then let them grow to be about like 2 feet tall and then plant them. But that summer, they arrived in May, and that summer was one of the hottest summers, and I had to get them out of pots because the soil was frying, and I was watering them every day. So it took me from about May until the end of June, maybe the beginning of July, to get them all on the ground. That's another bit of advice I can give to anybody. Ask friends for help. Definitely have a dinner party, invite them all over and be like, I need you to help me plant some trees, and then beer is free. I did it by myself, and it's a lot of work. It was fun. It's right up my alley. I was like planting trees. Oh, my neighbors was like, oh my God, what is she doing now? And these are all of these are some of the perennials I planted. So we can go to the next one. I tweaked the Miyawaki method a little bit too. So it doesn't have to be exactly the same. Like they said, it was 3 to 4 plants on a 1 square meter space. And I felt I had to take into consideration my neighbors, trees that would be, 60 feet tall someday. So I didn't, and I also wanted to have area for my dog, and we do agility, and I wanted to be able to have grass still just for her. So I ended up doing 1 plant per square meter on this section of the yard and then on the other section of the yard. So that's what all of these little poles are. I put the poles in. They're, I think they're bamboo. Oh God, but they'll biodegrade, so it's not that bad. And I just lost my train of thought. But anyway, these were where I was gonna plant everything, and I put signs on them, and I used them because everything was so small when I went in the ground. I didn't want to accidentally step on stuff and kill it. We can go to the next slide.
That's an important piece of it too, not
Yeah.
only for support, but for flagging, really.
Right.
Nothing else.
And this is what I did with the backyard. So these are all where I was going to plant everything. For the backyard, that strip along there was where the tractor killed my grass, but that's okay. For the backyard, I didn't dig anything up. And I'm noticing, so what I did when I planted is I stripped all the grass for each plant section. But I didn't clear that whole section out and put new dirt in and put any composting or anything like that. I just dug and planted. Because by the time I got to the backyard, I was like, I don't care. It's just getting in the ground. So there is a difference in growth, though, I can tell you. From the side yard where I did all the hay and everything, it's growing much faster. Like everything in that area is probably 3 times the size of some of the stuff here. So that does make a difference. We go to the next slide. These tubes are so important if you have rabbits or rats or mice or like any creature. Yeah, and there's Sophia. So trying to find tree tubes at a cost-effective retailer was really hard too. And I ended up finding these. I don't remember where they were, but again, if you wanna, I'll give you my email address, and if you guys.
We can just post it on our website.
Okay, a list of all the resources? Great, perfect. So I found these, and I liked them because they weren't like, a lot of the tubes are plastic, so they encouraged the tree to like grow straight up, but I already kind of had that, and I wanted air to get through them because it was so hot that summer. We can go to the next one. Same, what I did on the other side. This is a year later. And some of the trees, even, so I planted in the beginning of 2021. Even by the end of 2021, some of the trees had doubled in size. My plum trees and my birch actually tripled in size, and my plum trees doubled in size. Even the red oaks, anything that grows relatively fast is going to grow even faster when it gets into a situation like that. At least that's what I found. On the other side where the grass is, my red oaks are pretty tall, but my white oaks, and they're almost 2 years, are still only about this big. And I think it's a lot to do with that they're slow growers anyway, but I think it also has to do with the medium that they were planted in. We can go to the next one. That tree on the side. There's Sophia. It's like, where's Sophia? We'll play Where's Waldo. So this tree on the left, that's a plum tree. That tree was probably half of this little tree tube here when I first planted it, and that's a year later. And those are my little river birch. My river birch did so well. This is from my second story bedroom window. I planted clover. So I planted a canopy layer, an understory layer, a shrub layer, and then they suggest waiting to plant a ground cover layer for 10 months after you plant the other trees because they don't want it competing. But I planted clover right away for the rabbits, and it worked. So that's another,
Natural deterrent.
Yes. Yeah, this is the leaves. This is the leaves situation again. I did it 2 years in a row because I didn't learn the first time. And this is what it looked like last year. There's elderberry out there growing. I mean, there's so much, and it's growing so fast. And this is even in an area that didn't have a good soil system, so you could really do it.
Section.
Yeah, this is the bad section, and it's still doing well. And then I think, and this is, the clover has taken control, and everything is starting to. we can go to the next, and so I have, this is, I think, I started building like, walkways through it because you can't, literally cannot get through it. It's getting so dense now that you can't really, I mean, I do a walkabout every morning because I can't just let my dog out anymore because there are things living in there now. I mean, between snakes and rabbits and woodchucks and skunks and raccoons and possums and field mice and yes, the occasional rat, there are, like, I have to go out and walk, so I put little stones down because I felt like I was crushing and killing things. So I'm walking through the path to make sure everything is cleared out before I let her out. Otherwise, you know, she killed her baby bunny. That's what made me do it. She did it 3 years ago and I've never recovered, but. And this, I believe, is that still 2023? Yes, this was still 2023. This is, I believe, this year. That's my perennials on the bad side of the yard. That's my pathway.
That's the one that's.
The clover works. No, it's not.
That's it before.
It's my little woodchuck friend. And so this is just all of the things that I've never seen in that area before. It went from like a desert wasteland to filled with all kinds of birds I've never even seen. Saw a hummingbird last year for the first time on my trumpet honeysuckle. Oh, and this morning, I didn't tell you. Oh, I did tell you. So I was out doing my walkabout with my cup of coffee, you know, like chilling, and I bent down to pull out like, I don't know, some kind of weed, and I hear this loud buzzing, and I'm like, that is the biggest bee I've ever seen, and I froze, and I just like waited to see where it was going to go, and I kind of looked over my shoulder, and as I looked over my shoulder, there was a hummingbird like right there, hovering in my face. It looked right at me and just looked at me and then flew away, and I just, it was like a spiritual experience. I was like, oh my God, it's working.
It was saying thank you.
Yeah. I was hoping they'd come back, and he did. Bumbles, there are so many bees in the yard. Goldfinch, monarchs, cicada. I didn't know what that was when I found it. I thought something killed it, and I was like, oh my gosh. And then somebody told me it was a cicada casing. But they lived in my yard to do that, which is just amazing to me. A water source is important. Ladybug. I have raspberries. I have wild raspberries growing in my yard. I have wild strawberries and blueberries. I have a whole list if you want to see what's in there. We'll put that on the website too. This is this year. I lose my dog in my forest now. Like, I actually have to go outside and hunt her down. And it's not even that big of a space. Truly, it's, I mean, you saw the side yard and the backyard. It's not really that big, but it sure is dense. That's my you probably can't see it, but I have a blink camera on the bottom of on a little stone, and it catches all the wildlife, which you're about to see. That's my raspberries, my wild raspberries. Virginia creeper. And the thing about, so after I had planted all of these and planted my perennials, the thing about natives is you don't have to ever water them once they're established. This last heat wave, I didn't do any watering and they were all fine. Like, they're hardy New England plants. So once they're established, if you take the time to really take care of them when you first plant them, which is probably like a month or two with watering and weeding and making sure they're okay, you don't have to do anything to them anymore. So, and they produce over and over again. So seeds will fall, they'll grow up someplace else, and you never have to buy plants anymore. So you could just winter sow everything and have new plants to give to your neighbors, and then they'll plant native plants.
We'll end up with a whole green
Yes.
all the way through the city, corridor. All your wildlife can go elsewhere instead
Exactly.
of your yard.
Butterfly weed. Water sources are important. I found these. It might have been in front of your house too. I found somebody had cut a tree down on Southern Artery and left all the stubs. So I stopped by the side of the road and threw them in my car. I was like, I can use these. And I just threw them around in the forest. There's about 5 or 6 of them. Woodpeckers come to eat the ants out of them.
It was my neighbor.
Was it?
Yes,
Did she see me?
I think so.
This is that crazy lady with the red truck. Water sources on the floor are really important too. So I have bird bats for the birds, but I put those down for snakes, and I have other ones for bees. A bird built a nest in the white pine. They didn't use it. I don't know why. She was a robin. I might have scared her when I walked by and I didn't notice she was there, and I think she laid eggs, but here's my hummingbird. There he is. First hummingbird ever at that house.
First one in Quincy.
Is it?
That is so cool.
I was floored. Baby woodchuck. Clover works for them too. This is just a small example of what came in 2 years. You want them in your yard. They clean up ticks and grubs. They're a little scary, but you want them to. They're tough. Mockingbird eating my elderberries. Oh my God. I was like, wow, I have nature in my yard. My friend here made a good, oh gosh. He lives under the front stairs. I can't kick him out. He's been there for 3 years. It's a woodchuck, and she's going right to my strawberries. It's so funny. I'm sorry, I just could watch this stuff forever. Which brings me to my friend saying, she described me as being like, oh, my friend's sitting under the shade of a Miyawaki forest drinking Maypop tea. And that's basically what I do every single morning in the summertime. Just sit out there and listen and watch. Baby cardinal. That's it. Yeah. So you can
Thank you.
open it up for questions
Yeah,
if anybody
thank you
has
so much. That
questions.
was
Sure.
amazing,
So
isn't it?
we've tried for years to grow trillium, or have trillium come back in our yard. So we've tried the pine needles, we've tried removing chunks of my parents' backyard, blah, blah, blah. Not much. So have you been able to do any native ground cover, mayflower, trillium, anything like that?
I haven't. I actually tried wintergreen and it didn't take.
Yeah, we did too.
And I think that was because the rabbits ate it.
You tried tea-berry?
I'm trying strawberries for the first time. They're a nice ground cover and they spread. So I'm gonna try that and see if that takes. I don't think, I know that the woodchuck and the rabbit won't eat the leaves themselves. It'll just be the berries that they consume. And I'm okay with sharing, so. Yes.
Yeah, do you notice any like volunteers in your yard that like not like invasive things, but hey, I've got something new.
I think I noticed, what was it that you had growing?
Clasping Venus looking plants?
I think that's what it was, and I ripped it all out because I thought it was invasive. I thought it was non-native. I didn't use my app.
Yeah.
It'll come back. But I haven't, I'm trying to think of, I don't think I've seen anything that I haven't planted there that's been native. I've seen plenty of non-native stuff coming up. And my neighbor has Japanese knotweed, I was told. So I'm like, oh my God, no. So,
There's a nursery in Noel that has just, they sell just natives.
yes, blue stem natives.
Yeah.
love them. They're my favorite. I just got my strawberries and blueberries from them. And then there's a place called the Monarch Gardener. She was in Ipswich, but now she's in Topsfield, and that's where I originally got all of my perennials. And then there's Oak Haven Sanctuary close to her. He sells trees and shrubs, and he's all native. So it's nice to go to some place where you don't have to, because that was something else that I had learned, that it may have a native name, but it could be in parentheses or quotations underneath it that says something else, and that means it's a cultivar or it's not native. And I made the mistake when I bought perennials for the first time of being like, hey, I'm planting all these like native stuff, and it was all cultivars. So yeah, it's nice to walk into a place that just sells natives. And for me, for this project, I made sure that everything I planted was at least New England native. I'm not adamant about being like, it has to be in Massachusetts and it has to be within an area. As long as it's from New England, I'm okay putting it in the ground. That's why I planted red buds, and they're technically, I think they're a little bit outside of New England, but I really love them so much, and they offer such a benefit that I didn't have a problem putting those in either. I actually put 7 in, so yeah. Yes.
Can you talk about why you don't want cultivars?
Well, I learned that it depends on the cultivar. So I learned that if you change the color or the shape of a flower, pollinators end up not recognizing it as their food source. But if you change the size, that doesn't matter. So that's why the white pines are not like the white pines you see in the forest that are going to grow 120 feet. They're cultivars. They're Pinus strobus fastigiata. Can't believe I just remembered that. Wow. And I said it right too. A little stumbling, but I said it right. So they won't grow as tall, but they'll offer, I originally planted them because I wanted coverage, because there was no privacy anywhere, and I love my neighbors, but I'm kind of like, it'd be nice to not have to go outside and have a conversation every single time I went outside. But that's what I learned about cultivars. So
Excuse me, did you plot out what the mature forest would look like heights and widths between things?
I knew, like, I had taken which trees I wanted as my canopy trees and my shrub layers and my understory trees, and I figured out how tall they would be, and then I just like harem scarum planted them anywhere, because that's kind of what you're supposed to do. It's not supposed to be perfectly planted. It's supposed to be like thrown together like a forest. And I learned doing it that way. And that was another reason. I think the gentleman in the back had asked about replanting or trying to do this with Faxon Park. Through all my research, everything says you should start everything at the same size so that everybody is growing at the same time, and they're all growing upwards to get the sun. If you plant in a place where there are already established trees, a smaller tree may not be able to even grow because it will be outcompeted. So in a situation like that, it's better to go in there and rip up all the invasives and then let the mature trees do what their job is, to drop their seeds, and then those seeds will turn into trees. And the reason that you're planting so close together without really, worrying about who's going to be too tall and who's going to be next to each other is that under the ground, those roots are all growing together, and those trees are going to be stronger because their roots are bound. And so if you're getting a big windstorm, it's not to say a tree's not going to topple, because trees topple in the woods all the time. But for the most part, if their roots are entwined, they're going to be stronger than just a specimen tree standing alone. And this might be a little far-fetched for some people, but I read the Mother Tree book, and they say they communicate with each other through their root systems. They give each other, if one is in need of water, a tree that already has water will give it to any excess water to a younger tree that's trying to grow. So it all is like a symbiotic relationship when you plant it like all together. And I have a giant mother maple tree, a silver maple, in my neighbor's backyard. I'm praying they never cut it down. It's like 50 years old. I took some of her seedlings and planted them around her, and they're already over my head. So, yeah.
All right, well, oh, Sally, get another one?
Yeah, I'm just like, all the wildlife you have on your property, I really don't know the area where you live. Is it basically an urban area with yards and there's no park and like all of these animals and
Yeah.
I think they all just kind of hang out in your yard?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they bypass, they come in, they stop, they eat, they move on. I know that like they never did knock the forest down across the street. So now they have 2 places to go. And I know that there is a small woods behind Clifford Marshall School.
Oh, right.
There's a little bit of a woods there, but all of them, it's kind of like they're all little pocket forests. So they have places to go. I saw a deer across the street from my house. A deer. That was last year in the middle of like an urban area. I was like, how did you get here? And oh my God, please don't get hit by a car on the way to wherever you're going.
Just wanted to say, unless were there any other questions? I didn't want to cut everybody off, but yeah.
I just had one question for him, but I didn't get the chance to ask earlier.
Who, me?
Yeah, you.
Shoot.
I know it's a little forward thinking or whatever, but, we live in a house with a lot of mature trees. We're very fortunate for that. And I'm a little curious about like what the like 40 and 50-year plan starts to look like when these trees are so densely like planted and they're gonna start falling down.
Sure, no, the,
Like, I'm curious, especially like you're talking about like public park and like, we live near Cunningham Park, for instance, and we see them managing a lot of the trees by just cutting them down and putting them into piles and stuff. Whereas like realistically, the birds prefer it when there are, snags everywhere and there are actually dead branches around. I guess I'm a little curious about that sort of like the usage for people, which is we want it to be not quite as dense versus what the animal seems like and what you're talking about, which is planting it very dense.
right, well, for these areas, the focus is gonna be on the forest, right? And they're not in residential areas, things, like that, like as Maria says. But we, as far as, the long-term plan in a city is difficult because, it's not city property, right? So the good answer to that is succession planting, where we start to plant things now for when the big trees start to decline, they have, replacements growing in place there. But, that's maybe an education thing to try to get homeowners and residents to do that on their property. But we'll continue to do that same sort of thing in our public spaces, So that's really, that's probably not a great answer, but about as good as I can come up with right now.
I just was just curious.
Sure.
Well, thanks, everybody. I just wanted to thank QATV for coming, Brian. So we'll put a bunch of these resources online, the video of the talk, as well as I'll get some of these lists of your resources, yeah. And maybe we'll get the presentation as well, so we can go through it. But yeah, I'm totally inspired by both of you. Oh. So,
And you can say where online.
yeah, we're online. Yeah, sorry. So the QuincyTreeAlliance.com, that's our website, and there's also information about requesting trees from the city or, Hannah, who was late, but
Then we're gonna live that down,
put together an FAQ on our website, so that's been a really good resource for people. So yeah, we'll post all this stuff and reach out and we can connect to you. But anyway, thank you so much for coming and thank you so much for taking the time to put all this together and share this. Bye, both of you.